What's going on, guys? This is Junior from San Jacinto Knives. My first video I talked about the polishing stones that I use, and I showed a couple of them, and I talked about having a video where I kind of explained some of the stuff that I do with them and how they can really help you out as a knife maker. So I want to touch on that a little bit. So first off, I'm going to just show you some of the stones that I use and or have used in the past that have really helped me out a lot. The first ones are, the very first ones that I got were these guys right here from, well, they're from China. I've got an 800, 1500, 2000, and a 3000 grit polishing stone. I got these from eBay. They worked okay. I wasn't real happy with their ability to move material. They weren't very aggressive. They didn't really do a lot of what I wanted, so I kind of did a little bit of research, and I found a company that sells these boar-eyed orange EDM stones. These are the bread and butter of what I do. Let me zoom in a little bit and let you kind of see what those look like. Made here in the USA. I use a 220, 320, 400, and a 600 grit. These EDM stones, and the orange EDM stone is a softer material, so they will wear down a little faster, but they're very aggressive and they move material really quickly. The 400 and the 600, they're pretty hard. They actually will last a while, but this 200 grit here, it's very soft. I mean, I maybe will get, you know, 2 or 3 knives out of one 200 grit stone, depending on the size of the knife, but they're really worth their cost for sure. But then at my local rec supply machine store, I came across these Norton Edm Stones. These have been used quite a bit, so you can't really tell what they are. But this one is the fine, or the fine, and this is the ultra fine, two of the same kind there. And I really like them a lot. They are really hard. They move a lot of material. I wish they were a little bit longer to make it easier to do some of the draw filing that I do with them. But for the most part, they really get the job done, and they've kind of taken over the grunt work of what I do. And then if I need to move into some finer polishing, then I'll move on to these orange EDMs. And I'll take a second to kind of show you the 3 main things that I use these polishing stones for. Whenever you're finishing a knife and you're getting the blade ready, the main issue that you want is when you do the finishing, you want to keep your lines crisp. You don't want to round a whole lot of stuff off, and when you take the knife off the grinder and you start putting sandpaper to it, the problem with sandpaper is it's got a lot of give, and it will tend to round off a lot of area. So the 3 main areas that it helps me with to use these polishing stones, number 1 is to true up my bevels, because they're not as flat as you think they are coming off, even with a 2x72 belt. Even with a you know, a disc grinder, they're really not as true as you think they are. The Ricasso area here is a big challenge, and then also with this knife here, if you can see, it's got a clip point. This one has I've actually finished this blade. It's ready. It's a 600 grit satin finish. Move it around a little bit. The lighting's not too great. And the thing about it is, all of my areas here, my plunge line, my bevels, and then the transitional area between this bevel and this false edge here, that line remains crisp. The way I do that is through these polishing stones. So let me show you what the other side looks like. This is off of my grinder. This is about a 400 grit here, and you know, as you can see, my Ricasso area here has a little bit of low spots in it from, you know, just the way it's moved on the belt. There are also, some of them you can see, some of them you can't, but this bevel, although it may look good to the eye initially, when you start going over it with some really fine sandpaper, you'll see that you've got little grinder marks all the way down it to where it's kind of almost like a Ruffles potato chip kind of. It's got little waves down it. It's not as true as you think it is. If you leave it at a 400 grit finish with parallel lines, then you probably won't really notice it that much. But if you start to put a satin or even a mirror finish on this, you'll definitely see those imperfections. Also, the clip point, or the false edge, as you see here on the spine of the knife, that's been ground also to a 400 grit net. Right now, because I use a I use a work rest table with a jig to hold it at a good angle. I've got a good line here, a good transitional line. I want to try to maintain that, but I also want to start getting my finish on this blade. So the polishing stones can really help you do this without spending a lot of money on fancy belt grinders, disc grinders, and things like that. These polishing stones can really help you out and save you a lot of time. So let's move on to a couple of the areas, and I'll show you how we do this. We'll start off with how I do the bevels, then we'll show the transition line for the false edge, and then I'll show you what we do with the Ricasso. Alright, so we've got the blade, it's in the vise here, and like I said, you can tell there's definitely some waves along through here as the grinder cuts across perpendicular to the spine. And also, it's difficult off the grinder to get your edge all the way down to be completely uniform. Even if you use guidelines, it can be tough to do that. These polishing stones can help you with that, because you can actually use it along the edge when you've got high spots, and it'll actually help you to bring those high spots down and make your edge more uniform prior to heat treat. Because again, this blade has not been heat treated yet. I do the majority of my finish work prior to heat treating. Won't go really into a whole lot of detail on that, but the main reason is I don't like to work on the blade a lot once it's been heat treated, because I don't want to mess it up. So one of the things that I do is I use an anti-scaling compound, which I'll do a video on some heat treating to kind of show you how I do that. But I do 90% of my finish work prior to heat treating. When it comes out of the forge, most of the heat, I'm just basically touching it up at that point. Most of the finish work is done. This blade has not been heat treated at this point. So I want to get these edge bevels here cleaned up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off, because this is in pretty good shape, I'm just going to start off with this, get it down in here. This is my Norton ultrafine polishing stone here, and it's really simple. I'm just going to put a little WD-40 on here, and I'm just going to start draw filing this just back and forth like this. And as I do it, as this file, or this stone rather, passes over these low spots, the low spots will remain shiny because they're lower than the surface of the rest of the bevel. So I'm going to use this polishing stone to keep working on this until I get all of those low spots out of there, to where I have a uniform, even finish all the way down. It's very helpful in this area here right next to your plunge line, because when you start running a lot of sandpaper into that area, that sandpaper has give, and it's going to cause you to wash out a lot of your plunge lines. It can actually run over, especially here at the top. You can wash out a lot of your grinds and really make a big mess of things. And there's nothing worse when you're working on your edge bevels, especially when you're trying to get a finish on it. There's nothing worse than having to go back to the grinder and correct mistakes, because correcting a mistake means taking more material off. And I don't know about you, but once I've got it to where I want it, I like it to stay there. I don't want to have to correct a lot of things. So I try not to stay in one spot very often, because you can dig into it. I like to make full passes, and then I'll just start cleaning this thing off periodically. And you can see I've still got some low areas right in here next to my plunge line. This would have taken, I've got the whole rest of the blade is perfectly true, perfectly flat now. I've not rolled over any of my edge area, and I've not washed out this clip point. Now, if I was using sandpaper, even if it was on a hard backing, I'd have a lot of problems with that. So I'm going to keep working on this thing until I get this plunge area completely even and flush with the rest of my bevel. So that's the first way I use it to get my plunge lines right. Also, this little turnout up here at the top of your plunge line, that's a big problem area. It's hard to keep that crisp with sandpaper, because the sandpaper tends to want to run off. Whereas this polishing stone, it's going to stay locked in, and it's going to help you really get a crisp curve right there at the top of your blade. And it looks like I've just about got it. And that's going to do it. The next part is the Ricasso area. Same concept as before on the edge bevel, with just a little bit more care. Thing about my Ricassos are, once I've got them right, I never want to touch sandpaper to them. at all until I get to the point where I'm ready to put the final few grits of finish on it. So I'll never actually touch this Ricasso with sandpaper until I get up to about 400 or 600 grit, because I don't want to wash anything out. I want this plunge line to remain crisp. So I'm going to come in here again with this Norton Stone, and I'm going to kind of turn it as an angle because I want it to sort of hang over this area here in that transition, because it helps to sharpen that up. So I'm just going to draw a file back and forth, get a little WD-40 on here, draw file this back and forth across my Ricasso to bring that down, bring any deep scuff marks out of it, get any low marks out of it, and basically set it up for the foundation for my finish. And I've maintained my crisp. I've still got a really sharp plunge line there, which is what I'm looking for. Now the difference is with the Ricasso, like I said, is I'm never really going to touch it to sandpaper. So once I'm done with this Norton, heavy duty one, then I'm going to move on to my 320. And once I'm satisfied with my 320, then we just move up to the 400 on my boride stones. And then I'm going to move it up to my 600. Now obviously I went through that pretty quick because I don't want to waste a lot of your time showing you the whole process, but that's the gist of it. Do it just like sandpaper. I start with my lowest grit stone, work my way up to the finer grits, and then once I'm happy with that, for my final finish, I'll go and put, if I finish at a 600 grit satin finish, I'll go to, drop back down to say 400, do a few passes to get my scratch pattern right, then finish it off with my 600. Very easy, crisp lines. Last part, no different, is this false edge here, or clip point, false edge, however you want to, some people call them different things. This one won't be sharpened, so I guess this would be more of a false edge here. I do not want to ever touch sandpaper to this until I get to my very fine grits, because I don't want to wash out that transition. Same exact scenario. I'll start off with my Norton stone here, and I just draw a file, nice and easy. Careful not to rock it back and forth. I want to maintain a steady, even angle, and I'm going to work back and forth, long, easy stroke. I'm at this point, I'm not really putting a lot of pressure, but that's the beauty of these EDM stones, is if you need to move some metal, you can really bear down on these stones and move a lot of stuff at one time and not have to worry about washing or rolling over any of your edges, because these things don't really have any give at all. So I've got that where I want it. I'm going to move on to my 220, same as before. Then move on to my 320. If you're wondering why this 320 is a narrower diameter, it's because I'm not really good at reading the website order page whenever I selected the order, and I got the wrong size, but it still does the job. 320, 400, and then 600. And again, I'm going through this really fast, and normally I would spend a lot more time on this to actually get the finish, but you'll be surprised at how quick of a job it actually does. And right now, turn this around with just a few more minutes on my bevels here and a little bit more, I'm ready to start putting my final foundation. And it really saves me, literally, for a total knife, even a smaller knife of this size, these EDM stones have saved me, I would say, at least an hour and a half per blade of over and over working it with sandpaper to try to get all of these areas right and crisp. I mean, it's a huge time saver. Cost wise, these Norton, larger Norton ones, I want to say at Rec Supply these things are about $6 a piece, and they will last a long time. These orange EDM stones, these 220s don't last very long, but I want to say they're about $3 a piece, but you're still going to get 2 or 3 blades out of these guys. The 320, 400, and 600s, they're a lot harder. They'll last longer, but again, you're talking $3 or $4. So you can get a complete set of these stones for less than $20 and save yourself just tons of time. So hope this helps you out, guys. We'll see you next time.